Barnett hands to Woody up the middle, touchdown! And Iowa State has won it! Jim Woody took it in, and the Cyclones have upset the nation's second-ranked team. They did it.
All right, guys, welcome back. Thanks again for tuning in each and every single week with our previews and our recaps for the Cyclone fan perspective. Always brought to you by Play the Fight Song Podcast. Again, subscribe, follow our TikTok channel. You can find the username on the bottom. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to listen to this week's Week 11 episode. Cam, JP, and Reese took you guys through the slate. I did not. I was busy at a college basketball game, and I am on a flight out to Utah for this weekend's game in Provo on Saturday. So didn't get a chance to join in, but it's certainly good stuff from the guys. But, you know, I had to get you guys your preview for this week before I head out of town. So let's really get into it. Cyclones travel on the road, 5-4, fighting for a bowl game spot. They go and play a hungry BYU team, a team that's also 5-4, coming off a loss at West Virginia. This is a 9:15 kick in Iowa. It's an 8:15 kick over in Utah. That's still late. That's probably the latest kick I have ever been to a game in live. It's on ESPN though, so can I complain about Iowa State getting on primetime? I don't think I really want to. Let's get into it a little bit. For most of you Iowa State fans, this is another newcomer that you probably haven't had a bunch of eyes on this year for BYU, and I don't really blame you. They haven't really been in any interesting games. They've been blown out a few times. The most interesting game they probably had on their schedule is they went on the road and beat Arkansas early in September. And at the time, I was like, wow, okay, like BYU might be a pretty legit team this year. And I mean, that was the start of a 5-game losing streak for Arkansas, and we all know how they have been since they fired their offensive coordinator, and it's been a dumpster fire. So not that impressive looking back on that road win. Since then, they've had quarterback issues, they've had injury issues, and they just got absolutely tossed around in Morgantown last week. So let's start there. BYU went on the road last week to West Virginia. They lost 37-7. And really, it was just a dominating performance from the Mountaineers from start to finish. I think BYU was a little surprised. They went on the road thinking they could steal this one. They thought it was a lesser Big 12 team. They had just traveled to, I believe it was Austin the week before. Kind of didn't really stand a chance in that game, but they're like, it's not Texas, it's West Virginia. Like, they're a fringe, mediocre Big 12 team. We should go in there and win. And I think they came out of that game very surprised. West Virginia dominated them from start to finish. They rushed for over 336 yards. They had 2 different 100-yard rushers in Donaldson and another back. So that was really surprising that they had 2 guys going. But for me personally, and I think a lot of people who have really had their eyes on the Big 12 in years past, I'm not surprised by this. We know that West Virginia has one of the best front fives for their offensive line in the conference. Defensively, that's a different story. We could talk about that in a second. But West Virginia's got a really good offensive line. I wasn't surprised to see them push around BYU. BYU is lacking physicality and depth at a lot of different positions, and they took advantage of it. And sorry, people from Utah, I'm sure it was a world shock when you traveled to Morgantown and you're like, this is a different place to play. So I don't think they were really expecting that either. BYU is 3 for 11 on third downs. I'll get into that. They're a terrible third down conversion team. And they were 0-3 on fourth down. They kind of packed it in by halftime. It was 27-0 at halftime, I believe. And they just didn't stand a chance from the minute it kicked. JUCO transfer Jake Retzloff took under center for his first career start for BYU. We'll talk about Keenan Slovis in a little bit. I think he's battling an injury. Not sure if we'll see him on Saturday, but I'll talk about that, previewing the key players to watch for BYU in a second. But if you guys want to get a better view of where BYU is at, not only as a fan base, but as a team, I really suggest you guys go listen to the Locked On Cougars podcast. It's broadcasted by Jake Hatch. He's part of that Locked On crew that covers a bunch of different teams throughout college football, and this one specifically BYU. And this podcast is it was my first time listening to it, and it is hilarious. Like, it is actually comical. They bring on the center and captain in Connor Pay. Like, could you imagine if Iowa State had a podcast where, for instance, Cyclone Fanatic brings on like TJ Tampa or Rocco Beck or whoever, Jalen Knoll every single week, and just ask him about the games and go and listen. He's very blunt with his questions. He's like, why is the offensive line playing terrible? Why does it look like they don't care? Like, and kudos to Connor. And maybe this is because BYU has a bunch of 30-year-olds on their team, and Connor's a junior and he's a captain, and you can tell he's a leader just by the way he answers questions. Like, he's just a straight up dude. He was embarrassed by last week's loss, and it's really awesome. I think you guys should go and listen to it to kind of get a perspective of where BYU is at right now. I took a lot of different things away from it. They kind of asked him how the offensive line played. I think even then, that's really where I got the shock part for their loss to West Virginia. I think just by his answers, he was just surprised how dominated they were. He was like, Texas is a really good team. Like, we kind of expected Texas to kind of bully us around a little bit, but man, we did not expect to go into Morgantown and get pushed around like that. They even asked him, Hatch, the guy who leads the interview, he asked Pay about Retzloff and how his first career start went. And his answer was kind of just how I answered that. He goes, it was solid. Like, go back and listen to it. That is his quote for quote. That is exactly how he answered it. And man, does that really sound like you're very confident in your JUCO quarterback going into his second career start on Saturday? I don't think so. And he's talked about how he was embarrassed. He didn't sleep after the game. The vibes just don't seem high with this BYU team right now. But then later on in the interview, they obviously talk about Iowa State and how they feel going into this week. And then his mantra just completely changed. They're very confident playing Iowa State this weekend. I think the night game has something to do with that. I'm excited to go out there and really see what it's like for myself. But I think they're a historic program. I think they take a lot of pride in their home games. And it sounds like they don't want to let them down on Saturday. And I think maybe they saw some vulnerability spots with Iowa State matching up with Kansas on the offensive line and things like that, that I think BYU looks at an opportunity and says, we can get a win at home, primetime, big night game. So I thought that was very interesting. He says practice has been very, very dialed in this week. So they went from on Sunday to being down in the dumps, maybe the season's over, to now Wednesday's kind of rolling around. Apparently they have things dialed up and things change. Obviously, I don't think he wants to talk bad about his football team, but maybe we'll see. We'll see on Saturday if his words are true. So let's get into that. I want to talk about players to watch for BYU this week. I mentioned the JUCO transfer. Jake Retzloff will probably be getting the start on Saturday. Keaton Slovis, for those college football fans who really dive into it, the Keaton Slovis name is very familiar. Former USC transfer, former Pitt transfer. He's kind of like Emory Jones at Cincinnati. Your third stop kind of tells you a lot about yourself. He had a shoulder injury, is why he didn't play last week, but it sounds like he's getting back to being able to play. I'm pretty sure he practiced this week. But if you guys know BYU coach Kalani Sitake, he's a very old-fashioned coach. He's a very straight-up dude, and he'll answer everything positively, and he won't really leave anything short in the media. He said that Slovis should be good to go, but he just doesn't believe that just because you were coming off an injury, you deserve your spot to be taken. So that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting answer. Slovis hasn't thrown for over 200 yards in his last 3 starts. Retzloff, even though the offense didn't do anything, he still had 212 passing yards last week. I think he thinks he's playing better. Sitake thinks he's practicing better. So my guess is even if Slovis is good to go, I think they're going to play Retzloff. But you never know. I mean, Slovis has been efficient, even though he only throws for about 150 yards a game. And he's got numerous starts under his belt. He's been everywhere around the country. So with one win direly needed left on your schedule to get the bowl eligibility, I would think you would go with Slovis if he's available, but we'll have to wait and see. I would not be surprised if he does not play Saturday. Another guy to watch for in the receiving corps is Cody Epps. This is a guy last year that was returning with 425 receiving yards. He was kind of the Robin to Puka Nacua last year for that really talented BYU team. And he was going to seen as the guy to take the next step this year. I kind of think he's like a Jalen Knoll type for their offense. He's a slot guy. He's super quick. I believe he might even be a captain, but he's got 81 yards this year. He's averaging like 10 yards per game. It's been really weird. I haven't gone into why he's been as not efficient that he has been. I looked and see if he's had any injuries. Nope, he's played every game. For some reason, they can't get him the ball, and I don't want that to change on Saturday. He's a difference maker, and I want Iowa State in the secondary to keep him at bay and kind of keep his confidence at a minimum, because I think he is a game breaker, especially on Saturday. The guy you really want to look out for, their leading receiver, is Chase Roberts. He's kind of the important factor for their offense because they can't run the football. I'll talk about that in a second. So they have to get him going. He averages 13 yards per catch. He's got 512 yards on the season in total. Their offense isn't very good, but when it is efficient, Roberts is your guy to go to. So look out for him and TJ Tampa to be matched up on each other. I think Tampa is going to have a field day on him. I'll say it here. I'll say it now. I don't see Roberts having much success against Iowa State secondary, but we'll have to watch Jeremiah Cooper's injury status. We'll get into that at the end. LJ Martin is their leading rusher, but he hasn't played in 2 weeks. He's actually been hurt. Satake said he's been practicing since his injury, but he lost his spot to Aiden Robbins because Aiden Robbins has been better. That's crazy to me. He has 412 yards on the season in total. He hasn't played the last 2 games. So what? He's played 7 games this year. And for an offense that just struggles to move the ball in any sort of situation, passing, rushing, whatever it may be, you'd think you'd want your leading rusher, but Satake says he's not playing better than Robbins. So that's crazy to me because I think Robbins had like 37 yards against West Virginia last week. So not really sure what the situation is in that locker room, specifically on the offense side of the ball. Defensively, if you want to watch out for 2 players, you got to watch for Ben Bywater and you got to watch for Max Tooley. 2 linebackers. Tooley's the outside linebacker. Bywater plays in the middle. Bywater was like the leading guy for this defense, was almost seen as like a third team, second team, Big 12 guy going into this year. He didn't even play last week. So I thought that was really interesting. I have no injury status on him. I didn't really see what it was about. But if he's not playing in the middle, I think that's a huge opportunity for Iowa State for short crossing routes with Rocco Becht and to get short yardage gains on the run. So let's give you guys some stats on BYU this year. I talked about how their offense isn't very good. BYU ranks 126th in college football on third down conversions. For those who don't know, I'm pretty sure there's 131 teams in college football. So they're in the bottom 10 in third down conversion rate. They were 3 of 11 last week. Pay, the center on that podcast, he talked about how they just struggle to get good yardage on first and second downs. They're always in 3rd and 5s. They're always in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7s, maybe even 3rd and 12s. So watch how Iowa State handles that early. Watch to see if Iowa State's aggressive and on those first and second downs and see where they're at. Iowa State's usually not an aggressive defense, but I think this week they might want to mix it up because if you get them in a 3rd and 5 situation, they are absolutely atrocious. And I think you can really wreck their confidence early. They rank 123rd in total offense. They average less than 300 yards per game. It's bad. They don't have playmakers. They don't have a quarterback. At least right now, they don't have an answer at quarterback. Iowa State, in perspective, they do rank 101st, but we've talked about it before. I think last week in the first 3 weeks of the season really skewed those numbers. I think Iowa State's at least been a top 75 team offensively, which has been serviceable for how good the defense has been. But BYU, man, they don't get a lot of stops defensively. Like they don't have a defense to back them up. And they rank in the bottom 10 again in college football in total offense. They can't run the football. They don't have receiving threats. It's going to be a tough day for this team. But I'll talk about how it's a tricky spot for Iowa State at the end. BYU ranks 106. I don't think you should take that stat seriously. They give up 175 yards on the ground per game. But I said that last week on Kansas. I'm sure Cyclone fans that you are, you guys listen to Cyclone Fanatic, you listen to Chris Williams. He made an awesome point this week saying, just because we saw Kansas and how vulnerable they are on the rushing attack defensively, it doesn't mean Iowa State needs to go out there and play smash mouth football. I'm sorry. The offensive line has progressed. They've been better, but there is no reason Iowa State needs to be going to run the football 3 straight plays on the first possession. It just shouldn't happen. They have to get Rocco Beck going early. I think that loss last week to Kansas was a really good learning point for this offense. I think it kind of set them back to where, like, hey, we've done some really good things the last month, but we're not physically good enough to win these matchups. And I think these last 3 games, they're going to just turn that in their favor. And I think this week they see the same way. They see a really poor defensive line in BYU, but they're like, we're not going to establish the run game early. I think we get our short passing game going again. And then we let Sanders roll loose and get those big breakout runs like they had at Cincinnati, at Baylor. I think that's the blueprint for how you win on the road this week. So that being said, when we talk about blueprints, my 3 keys to win, I said it first, establish a short passing game. I want to see Jalen Knoll. Dimitri Stanley led the team in receiving last week. Get him going. I think you can get him going out in the flat. I think he's a nice, quick receiver that you can get going in the slot. I want to see Daniel Jackson get involved. It's been since Oklahoma State, I think, since we've really seen a breakout game from him. And as always, once you do establish the short passing game, that's when you unload with Jaden Higgins and the big plays and then the runs. Then it gets rolling. I think that's got to be a huge point for Iowa State this week. And I think they learned their lesson last week. I think it was a good lesson taught. So Iowa State be expected to start. Maybe they'll go run on first down, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get Rocco and the passing game going early. The second thing is you got to pressure Retzlaff. I think Retzlaff is going to play. I think he's going to start. Maybe Slovis comes in later if he's playing poorly, but I think the JUCO is going to get the start on Saturday. Iowa State is not an aggressive defense. They don't blitz a ton. They kind of sit back and wait for things to happen. Listen, I have no college football playing experience under my belt. I am not a college football coach, but I think they want to be more aggressive with the linebackers this week for John Haycock's defense. I think you got to blitz early. This team really struggles on first and second down. Like their captain, their offensive center captain admitted it, for God's sake. Get after them early, force them into 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, and I think the secondary is going to do just fine. If you blitz your linebackers, and I think Lovett is like fast enough to get after the quarterback. I think Sadowski's really good. McLaughlin's really good. Whether Jeremiah Cooper plays or not, this secondary is good enough to hold BYU's receivers if we send the linebackers. Like, if we need 2 or 3 seconds, I trust Miles Purchase. I trust TJ Tampa. I trust Darian Porter. And I think Blake Thompson, whether or not Cooper's good to go, I think Thompson had a good learning experience last week. I think he's good enough to handle BYU's receivers. I'm going to be honest. I don't like to sugarcoat things. I think Thompson will respond well if he does get the call on Saturday. And if Jeremiah Cooper plays, I think BYU is going to have a really, really tough time throwing the football. I think it's going to be a long day if Jeremiah Cooper plays. I think if Cooper does play, I give Iowa State a 25% chance better to win. I'll just say it. But I feel confident if you roll out Thompson there as well. I just don't think you're not facing Jason Bean and his legs. You're not playing Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm. Like, this BYU team, just they don't have the weapon at quarterback and they don't have the threats at receiver. Lastly, take the crowd out early. I am so excited to go out there. This is a historic college football program. The fans are really, really passionate. And this program takes a lot of pride. And their pride has kind of been smeared on the last 2 weeks, especially last week. Like, if you listen to that podcast they talked about, if you listen to Sataki in his press conferences, the fans are upset. They are calling for changes at the coaching position. And this is a very antsy crowd. It's going to be in BYU terms, they're going to be an angry crowd. I don't know how angry the Mormons can get, but I think this is going to be a crowd that really wants to get after Iowa State early. And how do you take them out? If you get the ball first, have a long drive, like a 5-6 minute drive, short passes on the outside. Maybe Sanders gets 5 or 6 yards per carry. You go out there and score on a long drive. Then you turn it right around. You get a 3-and-out right away. And I really mean that. I think that could be an easy opportunity. What'd you do at Cincinnati? That was a team who's not used to the physicality of the Big 12. You picked him off in that second drive. You picked off Emory Jones in that second drive, and it was kind of RAS from there. Like, you set the tone early. You got to do the same thing with this team that is really hurt on the BYU side, and they lack a lot of depth. That's how you get after this team, and that's how you take the crowd out early. I think if Iowa State can do that in the first 2 possessions, the line's set at 7 for a reason. Iowa State is a 7-point favorite on the road. They weren't even a 7-point favorite when they went to Ohio. What does that tell you? This is an opportunity for Iowa State to really open up the floodgates. But hey, my confidence level right now, saying Jeremiah Cooper's out, I think my confidence level is at a 60-40, 60% chance Iowa State win the football game. But I've definitely seen weirder things in my life. We've never made this trip as a team. We've never played this late. And they're in wounded animal mode too. They're fighting for 6 wins. They would love a bowl game just as much as we would. So a bowl game in their first year of the Big 12, that's a Super Bowl for them. So they have a ton to play for, and they're going to be very aggressive. So if you think Iowa State's just going to walk in there because they're a 7-point favorite, you're out of your mind. But I do think Iowa State's the much better team. I think they're going to get the win. If I had to put a prediction on it, I'm going to say Iowa State comes out early and gets after them. 27-14 is my final, and I think it's really not even close from the beginning. It's like the Cincinnati game. One good kickoff return in the second half, and Cincinnati doesn't stand a chance, and hopefully that crowd's leaving with 6 minutes left in the third quarter. That's where I want to see this, and I would love it and make my trip. It would make my trip. It wouldn't make it a whole lot better. It would make my trip. The trip couldn't be failed. So really awesome opportunity for Iowa State this weekend. You win this one, you surpass your 5.5 win total going into the season. You're bowl eligible. Justin and I talked about how big a bowl game would be for this young football team. And you don't have you play with nothing to lose next week when Texas comes to town if you win this football game. So take care of business now. You're the better team. You're the more physical team. You're the veteran Big 12 team. You got to go out there and prove it, but it's not going to be easy. Not going to be easy by any means. Before we get out of here, let's run through the Big 12 slate for some eyes to keep on this week. Last week was a huge, huge week for the standings in the Big 12. It kind of painted the picture going forward, but this week there's still some opportunities. Oklahoma State goes to Orlando. If they win this week, they're going to Dallas. Somehow Oklahoma State is going to the Big 12 championship after starting off, I think it was 1-2. TCU hosts Texas. This is Malik Murphy's first road test as the starter. TCU's had 10 days off. How do they respond? Texas Tech is on the road at Lawrence. Tech's been playing better. This is kind of a trap spot after a huge win for Kansas last week. Cincinnati's traveling to Houston. That's disgusting. Houston should win that football game. Baylor's traveling to Kansas State. Dave Aranda's fighting for his job. I don't think he'll have it at the end of the year. And an under-the-radar Big 12 game, West Virginia goes on the road to play Oklahoma. Oklahoma hasn't been playing very well the last couple of weeks, and I think West Virginia can translate well on the road with their run game, with their physicality on the offensive line. So keep an eye on that one. The Big 12 slates, it's heating up. It's November. Every game matters. This one is just as important as the rest. I'm super excited for the Cyclones. I hope you guys are too. We will talk Sunday or Monday night with my brother Justin. I'll give you guys some perspective of what it was like in Utah, and hopefully I can put a win back in my suitcase for the ride home. So as always, have a great rest of your week. Follow us on socials. Follow us at Play the Fight Song Podcast. Our episodes release every Thursday. And as always, you know what it is. Go Cyclones.